What's up, everybody? On today's show, Arkansas could be without one of their leading receivers this week. Georgia without one of their primary rushers. And Oklahoma without one of their coaches. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. On today's show, we're going to talk all things SEC, get you caught up on the latest news. Also, we will talk with our buddy John Talty. He's got a new book coming out on college football. And also a little bit later, Gary Stokan will join us ahead of Georgia Clemson coming up this weekend. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers get $5 and get a 3-week, or bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. All right, let's dive into it because we got plenty to discuss. And we will start over at Arkansas. As ahead of their opener in a couple of days, Arkansas is currently unsure of the status on one of their leading receivers from last year, Andrew Armstrong. Sam Pittman saying earlier this week that Armstrong is someone who was listed as questionable for the Razorbacks in their first game. And he said the Hogs likely wouldn't know if he's at his best and ready for the game until it comes to Thursday. So game time decision there for Andrew Armstrong. He said whether he's full speed or not, we're going to have to wait probably until Thursday night to find that out. Armstrong has been taking part in practices during the fall in Fayetteville. They just haven't been done in total, according to Pittman. He said he's practiced every day, just not, going 100%. So something to keep an eye on. A lot of people want to see what Talon Green, the new quarterback, looks like coming over from Boise State. Of course, Bobby Petrino and his epic return over there to Fayetteville. He'll be calling the plays as the OC, but certainly a guy that they could use. Now, they're playing Arkansas Pine Bluff, so you feel good about they can win this one without Andrew Armstrong. But this one's kind of reminiscent of, we talked about LSU yesterday, that Chris Hilton, one of their big receivers, is questionable for their game against USC. Bigger deal for LSU in week one than it would be for Arkansas not to have one of their returning leading receivers. All right, over at Oklahoma, the NCAA announcing recruiting violations occurring over at Oklahoma in the football program and in track and field, and they suspended Oklahoma assistant coach DeMarco Murray for one game due to impermissible conduct. Murray was suspended due to contacting 17 different prospects and their families over 16 months when he wasn't supposed to be doing so. He's been the team's running backs coach since 2020. His former running back at Oklahoma, of course, made a name for himself in the NFL, but he will be unavailable for the Sooners' first game this Friday night against Temple. According to a release from the NCAA, the school, Murray, and enforcement staff all agreed that the violations occurred. Among those issues were 65 impermissible phone calls and 36 impermissible text messages. Murray also shared he was not aware that a COVID-19 waiver of recruiting contact rules had expired at the time. So we will see. I think Oklahoma should be just fine against Temple without their running backs coach on Friday. Over at Georgia, they will be without one of their leading returning rushers for this week. We talked about it, but Roderick Robinson, Kirby Smart confirming he had surgery for a toe injury. When asked when Robinson could return to action, Kirby Smart said, not real sure. Probably will be week to week. Not sure how long it will take in terms of the surgery. So, we know that they have, a lot of new pieces in that backfield. Of course, Trevor Etienne coming over from Florida this offseason, projected to be the starter, but even his presence is uncertain. As we know, he had the DUI arrest in March, and Kirby Smart declined to comment whether Etienne will be available. So expect the Dogs probably going to ride with, see a lot of Cash Jones this week, Nate Frazier, we'll see. But could be interesting because Georgia does not have a cupcake. They got Clemson, albeit they're a 2-touchdown favorite, but Georgia's going to have to run the football and run it well if they want to beat up on Clemson. Over at Auburn, Hugh Freeze meeting with the media earlier this week, and Peyton Thorne was officially named the team's starting quarterback, but Hugh Freeze did mention the possibility of mixing in a Wildcat quarterback package with new transfer addition Sam Jackson. Jackson previously played at TCU and Cal. I took snaps at both quarterback and wide receiver. Over at Cal last year, he attempted 97 passes for 556 yards and 5 touchdowns. also rushed for 59 yards and a touchdown in 5 games. So Hugh Freeze indicating that Auburn could get creative. He said, look, Sam's definitely got some tools that you can use. Some in the speed sweep game, screen game, pass game. He's even played quarterback. Who knows? You might see him at Wildcat, but we're glad that we have him. So maybe a wrinkle to watch for. Of course, Auburn opens with Alabama and A&M, so they may want to keep some of those wrinkles close to the vest. May not need them this week in this one. Over at Alabama, Kalen DeBoer and company getting ready for their opener against Western Kentucky with Jalen Milroe, who was shaky at some points early last year, but rebounded, and now a lot of people have him as a Heisman contender heading into this season. And Kalen DeBoer talked about the work ethic of Jalen Milroe, what he's done this offseason to improve his game. He said he's been consistent, and that's what I think one of the biggest qualities you can have is consistency. Obviously, you want to consistently be at the highest level you possibly can be. You want to walk on the field. This is for any player, I think, but something Jalen has done better and a better job since he's gotten here. You know what you're going to get when you get out there, whether it's the attitude, the effort, the play on the field. There really haven't been any crazy highs or lows with Jalen Milroe. So expect big things with Milroe going into this season. Over Florida, the Freak is coming back to the Swamp. Florida announcing Tuesday that Gator legend Javon Curse will serve as Florida's honorary Mr. Two Bits for this Saturday's game against number 19 Miami. Of course, Javon Curse, big-time edge rusher from Florida back in the 90s and had a heck of an NFL career. And we'll see what if he can get that crowd fired up over there at the Swamp. That game set for 3:30 Eastern on ABC Saturday afternoon. Over at Ole Miss, they enter this season with high expectations. They'll open with Furman this week, but the program announced Tuesday that all home SEC games have officially been sold out. Ole Miss opens the season with 4 non-conference games, and the Rebels will be excited for their slate against SEC teams. They'll play all 8 SEC games in a row, starting with Kentucky on September 28th, and they do have a home slate that includes Oklahoma, Georgia, the Egg Bowl, so some really good games coming up on the schedule for the Ole Miss Rebels. And one quick thought here. 2 SEC head coaches, obviously on the hot seat this season, but ESPN reporter Pete Thamel, who normally breaks news and that sort of stuff, he was on an article on ESPN.com, and he was asked to name coaches on the hot seat, and he put Billy Napier and Sam Pittman in that mix. We shall see what happens. Obviously, a big early test for Arkansas. Week 2, they got to go to Oklahoma State. And, of course, Billy Napier right out of the gates. They get Miami this weekend. So 2 big tests for those 2 coaches. If they can win those games, if Florida can beat Miami in week 1 and Arkansas can find a way to win at Oklahoma State in week 2, I think that'll cool the seat a little bit for both Napier and Sam Pittman. But Pete Thamel putting them on alert. Hot seat action. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to talk with John Talty about his new college football book. Of course, a longtime writer for AL.com, now with CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports. We'll talk with John Talty coming up here in just a second. More Locked On SEC right after this. Well, first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. And we've been telling you guys about the Game Time app. I enjoy using it. It's a great app that, again, you can get last-minute football tickets on or concert tickets, whatever it is. In Game Time, they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks will filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Again, great, easy app to use. Their curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it is. And the all-in pricing feature, I love. You got to toggle it, turn it on. But if you turn it on, it will show, the feature will show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly what you're going to pay. Go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off your first purchase. It is the Game Time app. Definitely go check them out today. And again, super easy to use. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And look, FanDuel, you heard us talk a lot about FanDuel all summer long. They are still America's #1 sports book. And we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download America's #1 sportsbook. It is FanDuel.com. And, of course, they got all the SEC games happening throughout the season in conference. They got the action. Make sure you get started today. Check them out. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download the app today. Right along here, and always a pleasure to catch up with this guy. He has been covering college football a long time. He is John Talty. You know him from his years over at AL.com, now at CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, and he's an author. He wrote the book on Nick Saban, great book and stories, Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban, great stories and principles. Finished that one over the summer. And now a new book out with Armin Catan called The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos. John, welcome in, man. How are you?
Good. Appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah, it's let's start right here. I want to talk some college football stuff with you and talk about this SEC season and a ton of stuff, but let's talk about the book. I mean, this ever-changing landscape of college football, so many changes in just the last few years, NIL, the transfer portal, players getting paid. Give me a thought on what led you to write this book now.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that. I think, for me, it really started, the genesis behind it was the famous Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher war of words. And I think it was, to me, it kind of like sounded the alarms of these are two guys who know each other very well. And in public, they had always been deferential to each other. As you read in the book, there was some behind the scenes things that were a little bit different, but I was just so curious what could possibly be happening within college football that these two guys would be willingly burn the bridge with someone they know pretty well over recruiting and NIL. And so that's where it started. For me, it had expanded out from there. And we, brought in different personalities and coaches and other different people. But I think it was just trying to understand where the state of the game was, what was impacting people, and how it was affecting different levels. So within the book, we have a lot about Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh, Kirby Smart, but we also have a chapter on 5-star quarterback Julian Sayin and what it's like for him to navigate this new NIL world. We have a chapter on the NCAA enforcement team and what they were kind of dealing with when this all went into effect, and there wasn't a lot of seemingly NCAA investigations happening, but there was a lot happening behind the scene that people didn't know about. So try to give people kind of an in-depth 360 look at where college football is and how we got here and where it's headed. And it's, I think, the most fascinating time since I've been covering college football for sure.
I was going to say NCAA enforcement. What even is that anymore? Huh? It's like, how do you enforce any of this stuff? I know you probably have some great stories in this book. I know the one that kind of made the headlines a couple of days ago, Nick Saban yelling at Jimmy Sexton about Lane Kiffin. Do you have a favorite story of something you guys unearthed to tell in this book?
I think that's definitely one of them. I think it was just kind of fun to try to understand how these guys, work, in that dynamic between those two guys. And also I think the Saban Jimbo stuff I think is really fascinating and kind of the back and forth is, one guy, there's, bad word use, so I'm gonna have to bleep and skip ahead, but one guy who worked for both of them and was there at LSU with both of them, I asked him about it and he's like, they're just two testosterone-ridden babies, and, it's just kind of these alpha guys, but, at their core, they just can't control themselves sometimes. And so, that was, I think some of the quotes in there are pretty funny. I asked former NCAA president Mark Emmert about the Saban Jimbo fight, and he had some pretty funny quotes about it. But yeah, there's a lot of details in there about guys that I think you care about, Saban, Kiffin, Jimbo, Kirby. There are some interesting anecdotes, funny stuff about them. I'll give you one that I don't think has gotten anywhere, hasn't been published yet, and except in our book. But Saban calls Kirby Smart on Christmas Day and says, "Hey, I'm going to call you back. No, I need you to call me back in an hour and tell me that I need to go into the office." And so he was already getting antsy on Christmas Day, I think, with his family around him. And so Kirby calls him. Nick Saban pretends he has an emergency that he has to go into the office. Goes into the office, starts working on Christmas, and then being Nick Saban, who he is, gets mad that no one else is in there. And so he starts calling other people to come in to work on Christmas. Again, it's not necessarily like anything bad. It just explains like just kind of who this guy was and what it was like to work for him as long as Kirby did.
Yeah, now he's sitting next to Pat McAfee gunning Guinnesses. I have to wonder if he's questioning his life decisions now. The guy with that work ethic now, this is the life he chose, working on a College Game Day. To that point, give me a quick thought on the season getting underway this week. Is the departure of Nick Saban, are we not talking enough about that as one of the top storylines in all of college football?
I think it's tough because he's still in our lives in some ways, right? You mentioned the game day, and I think a lot of people, I was not surprised at all, but I think a lot of people were like, wow, Nick Saban's really good at this. And he is. He's been working toward this for a long time. And, and as you talked about, you read my first Saban book, I wrote about in that book about how he thought about game day, a decade ago. So this has always been top of mind for him. But, I think as the season goes on, I think it'll become more and more of a storyline. I think it kind of takes that first Alabama loss for us to A, remember Saban's not there, and B, see how the fan base reacts to it. Right now it's all like sunshine and butterflies in Tuscaloosa. People love Kalen DeBoer. He's done a really good job in a lot of ways. Recruiting is going well, saying a lot of the right things. Very nice guy, a little bit different personality than Nick Saban. But I think when they have maybe some challenges, or let's think about it. When they played Georgia, not seeing Saban across the sideline from Kirby Smart, I think is going to be, a little arresting for fans. I've seen those guys battle it out for so long. So I do think I don't want to say it's flown under the radar, but I don't know that we have fully felt the impact of it, and won't until the season fully starts and we see how different Alabama looks without him on the sideline.
Yeah, and God bless Kalen DeBoer. And after his first loss, my goodness, that fan base, they may eat him alive there. But breaking news: Alabama will lose a game somewhere along the way, whether it's this year or next year, somewhere. It's how the fans will handle that loss. You covered college football in many different aspects, different places. Do you like the current state of where college football is right now?
I think what's interesting about it, and this is something that we write a lot about in the book, is that in some ways it's never been more popular and more exciting. But then you also talk to all these people within college football who are like miserable, and they're talking about how stressed they are and all these different changes. So I think college football is at a weird inflection point right now where we're not all the way through, these major changes that are happening and still need to kind of play out a little bit. I think in a few years, we will be in a better place, hopefully. But I think right now, one of the concerns that I hear from fans is, and this would be my fear overall with college football, is just like, I don't even really know who's on the team anymore, right? And they still have time. Once the season starts, they'll get caught up. But I do think the transfer portal, guys just coming and going seemingly at the drop of a hat, I do think it's hurt fan interest a tiny bit, not in the overall process, because I think college football is super exciting right now, and I can't wait for the 12-team playoff. But I think on an individual team basis and the kind of individual attachment to players, I think there's some fear that might be a little bit diminished in this current era. And I think it might take salary cap, contracts, where when guys are coming and going, and not that, hey, I just bought a Quinshon Judkins Ole Miss jersey, and then 2 days later he's in the portal and he's going to Ohio State. That's tough for fans right now, I think, to really be invested in certain players if you just don't know if they're going to be there.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to a buddy of mine who, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, was of the mindset of, players getting paid. I don't know if I like this. That guy is now part of a collective at his school paying money that's going to the players. So, we all evolve. We all change our opinions as time goes along. We're talking with John Talty, a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and his new book is out, The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos, along with Armin Katan. Another quick thought, John. Kirby Smart in Georgia, they're the perennial favorites to win it all this year. If they get it done, can you start working on your next book, The Georgia Dynasty, how Kirby took the Dogs to 3 out of 4? I mean, it literally, we'll start throwing that D word around Dynasty if they get it done again this year.
I mean, he was pretty close last year, right? If they had, won that game against Alabama in the SEC championship, I think they would have had a really good shot to win it all. And that would have been the three-peat, which is something that, Nick Saban had never accomplished. And we write about in the book, but it was a major priority for Nick Saban and Alabama to unseat Georgia last year, because that dynasty word was starting to float around. And we'll never forget the David Pollock moment on game day, right? Where he essentially says to Nick Saban's face, Georgia's the new king of college football. And that was motivating for a lot of people at Alabama. But, if he can win 3 out of 4, that would be obviously incredibly impressive, because I think it's going to get harder and harder to do this. I do think, in theory, I could be wrong 5 years from now, you can make fun of me, but in theory, the expansion of the 12-team playoff, NIL, it should lead to a little bit more parity. There should be a few more teams that get in the mix that maybe can rise up. There's more games you're going to have to win, so that path could get a little bit harder. You got to be perfect a little bit longer. I think it's going to be harder and harder to have the run that Georgia's had in the last couple of years, and the run that Nick Saban, of course, had it at Alabama. But they're in a great position right now, and I call Nick Saban the greatest of all time in my first book. I stand by that. But there's one guy who I think could potentially unseat him and take over that title. It's Kirby, just because of what he's accomplished already, how young he is, and how well set up they are for the future, including this year, where they've got a great roster. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and they have a real opportunity to win a national championship this year.
Yeah, that's crazy. I guess it never really crossed my mind, but like Saban and everything accomplished, past the Bear and all that Kirby could trump that down the road. I mean, you're right. I mean, another decade of this and several, another a handful of rings, Kirby could absolutely enter that conversation. On the flip side, John, Ole Miss and the Rebels, they're loaded. Jackson Dart back, all these pieces. In your mind, can Lane Kiffin be an elite coach? Because I mean, it's like, to me, he's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like, this is the chance. Put up or shut up time. Like, can Lane Kiffin become that elite head coach and get his team to a playoff?
1,000% agree with you. This is the year. I mean, to me, they are maybe the most fascinating team in college football. Maybe it's just because I'm a little biased. I've been in the SEC, covered them a good bit, but they, to me, feel very boom or bust this year, where they had a really good returning core, and they went all in on NIL, the transfer portal. They, I think, had one of the best transfer classes. They went out and got guys like Walter Nolan, who was a 5-star from Texas A&M, Juice Wells from South Carolina. I mean, they very clearly, we're loading up on 1-year rentals, last dance style, let's go for broke. And they have a favorable schedule. So I do think it's playoff or bust for them. And this is going to be a really interesting year for Lane Kiffin, because to your point, as much as we all love Lane and as much media attention that he is able to generate for all of us, what's his best win? What's his best season? He's come close. Last year was a really good year, but you couldn't beat a very vulnerable Alabama team, couldn't beat Georgia. Good year overall, right? I'm not knocking him, but what's the definitive marquee Lane Kiffin win as a head coach? I don't know that he quite has it yet. And so this year, I think, is where you want to see him level up with all the talent they have, with what feels like one of the more wide open playoff races that and I can remember. And of course, that's benefited by the playoff expanding. But this feels like their year. And can Ole Miss do it? And the other kind of part of that is, if they do really well, does Lane Kiffin go shopping for other jobs at the end of this year? There's already some of those rumors buzzing about. So this is a critical year, I think, for Lane Kiffin, and certainly for Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss could sign him to a 20-year contract, and his name will still pop up every year in coaching rumors, and it's always going to happen. That just comes with him. You asked what was his best one? Probably the LSU game last year. Jay Daniels goes on to win a Heisman, but still, it was a historically awful defense for LSU. So I don't know if you beat your chest on that one. What other college football thought on this year, John, with the season getting started? Who's the SEC's best chance at a Heisman? Put it that way.
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's hard not to look at QBs, because this is such a QB-dominated award. So, I mean, to me, the first one is, you go Carson Beck. But, you go down Jalen Milroe at Alabama. I think Nico at Tennessee. Now, again, I'm not saying that I am buying into these, but I'm saying, what could I talk myself into if they have a good enough year with production-wise? I think those are a couple of Quinn Ewers, of course, at Texas. Those are kind of the names that initially come to mind for me. I'm probably forgetting one right now, but it's easier, I think, for QBs. And can they be good enough if you're, probably have to win? I mean, Jaden Daniels kind of changed this a little bit, but typically you got to win probably 9, 10, 11 games. What team's going to be good enough and have a QB who's in the spotlight enough? Those are some of the ones that are, top of mind for me, at least.
Hey, it's interesting, the Jaden Daniels thing, because if somebody presented to me and they said, what if Ole Miss goes 10-2, They make the playoff, they lose, but Jackson Dart throws for 4,000 yards, most touchdowns in the country. I'm like, you know what? That might be the year. Yeah. And we've seen Lane, even in his time at Alabama, he knows, let's run up stack up the yardage for our running backs to get them to win a Heisman. I mean, he's been there, done that. So,
yeah, I mean, I think to me, the two dark horses, you mentioned one of them, but I think, they have the same name, but spelled differently, but like Jackson Dart and then Jackson Arnold. I mean, those are two that I think you could see, if they have a certain kind of year, could they elevate up? But you're right. I mean, for Ole Miss, if they make the playoff, Jackson Dart looks awesome. They have a fun offense. We know they probably will. I definitely could, talk myself into Dart having a shot right now.
Yeah, that Oklahoma schedule, it's just so brutal. But I always say this too. In the offseason, you always talk about how tough a schedule is until you get into the season. Like you think, Florida State, they lose to Georgia Tech. Suddenly Florida Gators are going, hey, we're not scared of Florida State now. So it's just always funny. Once you get in the season, you find out if a schedule is actually tough or it might be a little bit easier than you thought and vice versa. So we will see. Excited to get the season going and a perfect time to check out his new book. Of course, he is John Talty. Love the book, Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban. Just finished that this summer. And now a new one to get started on, The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos. Let everybody know where they can find the book, John.
Yeah, anywhere you buy them. I mean, you can order it on Amazon right now, and it could probably be, in your mailbox in a day. But Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, your local independent bookstores, anywhere that you feel comfortable buying a book, it's available. But you can get it right now. It's available in stores everywhere, and we're really excited about this one. This was a hard book to write. College football has changed a lot from when we started doing this book to where we ended. But I think it made it a better book. I think it took us down paths that I don't think we anticipated going down, but leads to a really interesting narrative that I think fans are going to be excited about. And I think will be fascinating even a decade from now when we look back at, what was it like when we made boosters pay all the players? Like, what were we doing back then? That's going to be like, I hope that this book is that like, the wild era. Yeah. Like, let me go back and read that book and see when we had to beg boosters to pay for players instead of paying them directly. That's what this era is. And that's what this book tells, all of those fascinating stories.
Yeah. The movie Blue Chips will just be forgotten. Like, what was that movie all about? What was that?
This is the modern day Blue Chips. We can make that happen. Somebody can buy the movie rights. You can do the college football version of Blue Chips. Nick Saban kind of feels like the Gary Busey character. Maybe that's how we do this.
Yeah, I'll take a 6% finder's fee on that movie rights deal. He is John Talty. You could do any book signings or anything? Gonna be out and about?
So yeah, if you want to order some books, there's a great little bookstore in Birmingham called Little Professor. You can find, I think it's like littleprofessor.com. You can Google it, Birmingham. And if you want to order a signed copy, they're mailing them out to people. It's my kind of local bookstore, so I've been signing them there. And then yeah, we'll probably do some along the way. It's we're in football season mode, so it's a little hard to do some of these things, but that's kind of the place that I'm pushing people to. If you want a signed copy, and happy to sign as many as you want to order.
I'm just gonna find you at a college tailgate and just track you down and make you sign my book. That's what I'll
do. Would love to do it.
He is John Talty. Congrats on all the success, man. Great to see you doing it on the national scene now up at CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, and congrats on the last book. And let's hope this book is just as successful. Always appreciate the time, John.
Thanks, appreciate it.
All right, more Locked On SEC right after this. I want to remind you guys, today's episode presented by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. And look, as you guys are getting ready for watching sports all this weekend, make sure you grab a 5 Hour Energy shot to stay alert to watch all your favorite games. Or if you stayed up late to watch that intense overtime game the next morning, you're going to need a 5 Hour Energy shot to get your day started. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website is flavors galore, like watermelon, grape, berry, whatever it is. They got something for everybody. Try them all. And on their website, even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors. They'll deliver it right to your door. Go check them out. 5hourenergy.com. That is the number 5. hourenergy.com. Get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB, LOCKEDONCFB. Receive 20% off your order. Offers only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today to check them out. All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC. And a couple weeks ago at SEC Media Days, we had the pleasure of sitting down with Gary Stokan, CEO of the Peach Bowl and the Chick-fil-A kickoff game and all the stuff, great stuff they've got going on over there in Atlanta. So figure we bring you, with Clemson, Georgia happening this weekend, a little bit of our conversation with Gary Stokan and all the great work they've got going on. And it should be an interesting game, Georgia against Clemson. If you're into the betting odds, as that becomes more and more mainstream, I guess, Georgia picked as a heavy favorite, but it's no surprise, because it seems like these SEC teams, when they play in these openers, there's a lot of crooked numbers out there. SEC teams just seem to dominate in these openers.
Well, the SEC's been a very good partner with us, starting all the way back in the old Chick-fil-A Bowl, now Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, as well as in the SEC Championship in Atlanta, and now in the Aflac Kickoff game. So we're very blessed to have the number 1 or number 2 alumni bases of all the SEC schools living in Metro Atlanta, other than right now Texas and Oklahoma as new members. But great support from the SEC Conference, great support from the SEC fans and the coaches, the athletic directors of the schools. So it's a great partnership, a great relationship, and we're very humbly blessed to have it.
Do you have a favorite matchup you attended?
Gosh, they all have different stories, and it's kind of like having put all these together, it's kind of like your own kids.
Yeah.
They all have a different story, and so, it's just, I guess for me, it's more, like creating the $63 million that we've been able to create to give away to charity by using college football. That's what's near and dear to my heart, how we've been able to impact other people positively through the use of college football.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and particularly, like you said, with the playoff game. And look, I like that we're going to get a mix of, we're going to get some on-campus games in the early rounds of the playoffs. And look, these intra-site games, I think a lot of them are awesome. They can accommodate a lot of fans and a great, a little bit more intimate environment, I guess, in some of the massive stadiums. But, you do kind of, if you have to go out to L.A. or Phoenix, it's a little bit tougher. Atlanta just seems so central. Anybody can kind of get to it. I think I'm a little biased on that one.
No, that's a great point. And we've been told that, having the opportunity for people to drive to our city makes a difference, because you're now week to week playing in games, so fans are going to have to spend money to travel.
Yeah.
Where if they can drive in. Secondly, we're not necessarily a destination city in late December, so we've got 16,000 hotel rooms downtown, and so you can get an inexpensive hotel room to come to our city, and being able to get in and out quickly, whether you want to fly. We have great flights through Hartsfield, Jackson Atlanta Airport, through Delta. So all those things, and let alone the number of alumni that we have living in Metro Atlanta. So all those things make us really susceptible to a lot of success with this new college football playoff.
Yeah, it's just going to be really fascinating to see what happens. And I hope they keep, if they said anything about trying to keep the, teams that are in somewhat regional, it seems like you're going to try to keep teams that are at least in proximity of Atlanta coming here, but you never know.
Well, it's interesting. We're in the last 2 years of our first 12-year contract with the CFP, and so there's still contracts that exist between some of the conferences. So, in other words, this year, the Sugar Bowl still has a contract with the SEC and the Big 12. And so the conference champ of the SEC and Big 12, who's ever ranked highest, will play in the Sugar Bowl.
Okay.
The ACC has a contract with the Orange Bowl. But because the Orange Bowl is the semifinal this year, the ACC conference champ will be flexible.
Okay.
Right? The Big Ten has a contract with the Rose Bowl. And since the Rose Bowl is also a quarterfinal, the Big Ten champ will play in the Rose Bowl. And so us and the Fiesta Bowl are the kind of at-large bowls that'll be available for the other two conference champions.
It's interesting. And
at least for the next 2 years. Now, 26 going forward, things are still up in the air.
Yeah, well, we may be expanding more playoff teams anyway by then. We'll see what happens. All right, thanks again to Gary Stokan for joining us. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. And hey, for your second listen, you can go check out our friend Spencer McLaughlin over at Locked On College Football. He's got you covered, talking all the big storylines heading into each week of games across the world of college football. But this has been Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy, talk to you guys tomorrow. Go on back right here.